Hello, my fellow office warriors, and welcome to Dear HR Diary by Manage with Heart, where HR and management meet snark, sass, and a treasure trove of unforgettable tales. We'll dive deep into the wild world of human resources and management like never before. We unwrap the juiciest HR and management stories, tackling the real, the ridiculous, and the utterly outrageous. From hiring horror stories to office romance debacles, we spill the tea on everything HR and management related, all while sharing practical tips and tricks for navigating the corporate maze. Dear HR Diary is the unfiltered truth you wish they taught in management school. We prove that behind every HR policy is a story waiting to be told and solutions to be created. Stay tuned for a roller coaster ride through the thrilling, sometimes baffling, world of HR and management, served with a generous dose of humor and heart. Well, hello, my office workplace warriors, and welcome back to another episode of Dear HR Diary by Manage with Heart, the unfiltered truth you wish they taught you in management school. I am so fortunate today. I have a fantastic guest on the podcast, Dr. Ann Welsh. Ann began her career at Harvard before opening her own practice with a focus on supporting women in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, and healthcare. Yay! And working parents across career sectors. Her coaching brings together research and real-life experiences to hone leadership skills, improve emotional intelligence, and create work-life integration. So welcome, Ann, to Dear HR Diary. We're so glad to have you.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, I'm excited. Today, we're going to talk about a topic that I am passionate about. I know Ann is passionate about, and that is working parents, because I have some statistics for you all that I found really interesting as I was doing some research on this. As of January 2024, California, Colorado, Connecticut, Delaware, Hawaii, Maine, Maryland, Massachusetts, Minnesota, New Jersey, New York, Oregon, Puerto Rico, Rhode Island, Washington, and Washington, D.C., if you're keeping count, that's 16 states and the District of Columbia that actually have some sort of state mandated paid family leave, which I'll include that link at the Mercer article, and I'll include that in the show notes. And so when I dug a little bit deeper, which I thought was great because I'm talking about family leave and like really incorporating family leave and then returning from family leave, there's a whole lot of moving parts. And I thought this was great for Ann and I to have conversations around. States are really starting to see the shift in providing paid family leave for working parents, particularly women that are giving birth. So we're starting to see that. I know when FMLA, the Family Medical Leave Act, came about in 1993 by President Clinton at the time, it really introduced the 12-week leave of absence. Now, what I found out, even further digging, is 40% of women don't even qualify for FMLA, which is staggering. I'll include the Department of Labor link to what FMLA is. We're not here to talk about the law or the regulation. We really kind of want to do a deep dive in how we can support both women and men when it comes to working parents. Only 12% of women in the private sector have access to any sort of paid maternity leave. 12%. That I was like, what? There is no federal paid maternity leave. It's left to the states to figure out. And this also is alarming to me. 25% of women are forced to return to work within 2 weeks of giving birth to support their families. That is a really, really sad statistic. And then probably one of the other ones that I thought was really, really sad was the United States is the only high income country to not offer paid maternity leave on a federal level. Paid leave is guaranteed in 178 countries, with the U.S. not being one of them. So not only as a family member, is either having a baby, your mom, dad having a baby. And so they're really super excited, stressed, worried, all the stuff that comes with being a parent. Not only that, but now they're having to juggle their work and their own life and what that, kind of details. Did any of that surprise you, Ann? I'm sure in all the stuff that you do, you've probably seen these numbers happen time and time again.
Yeah, sadly, no, it doesn't surprise me. And I think I think there's been movement. I'm hopeful, right? A lot, that list, 16 states is longer than it was a year ago.
Yeah.
So we gotta, take the wins where we can get it. But as you notice, right, there's still a really long way to go. I don't know about you, but certainly I could not fathom going back 2 weeks after having a kid. And I had to go back after 6 weeks, and that was all I had. And that was hard enough. So to have 2 weeks is just unbelievable. And I think really painful for everyone involved.
Absolutely. I have 5 children. And so my oldest was born in 1989 and my youngest was born in 2005. So the law changed from the start to the end of child rearing, if you will, childbirth. But I know just as a parent, having to return to work and having to deal with how my employer is going to treat me, not let alone my own mental well-being. Why or how can working parents actually find that balance, right? So their mind could be at home with that baby, or it could be at work. What are some things that you are helping parents do to come back to the workforce and be effective employees as well as, great parents?
Yeah. And I think that's a great question. Zooming out a minute in terms of the parental leave and coming back, obviously everything's going to feel different if you're someone that has 6 weeks versus if you have 6 months, or maybe even longer. But the big picture is to understand that it's another whole transition. So you are going from working person to working parent, and that in itself is a transition. So you've already done the person to parent, and now you have to do working person to working parent. And that is a challenge. And I tell people to almost treat it like you're having the baby all over again, right? I mean, down some guilt in the freezer and get more help than you need or that you think you're going to need, because it's probably going to be harder to, get a lot of support in that transition because it is pretty massive. And one of the services that I, provide is parental leave coaching. So coaching through that exact moment. Ideally, that's something that an employer provides for you, right? Like that's my goal, is to have this be, standard across the board for people as they go out on leave, that their employer provides coaching on how to get ready, how to prepare. That's doing things like talking about, who am I going to hand my work off to? What is that transition going to look like? What do I want my communication patterns to be like when I'm on leave, right? Do I want to know every nitty gritty detail that's happening? Do I want to just have people treat me like I am, dead essentially, and they cannot smallest thing? How do I want to come back? Then it's helping support them while they're on leave, right? This is a huge thing you're going through. Do you need any support? How is it going in terms of that communication? There's also some mental health support usually during that period. And then there's coaching on the other end. So how does that transition back go? You planned all of this stuff, but what's the reality, right? Because planning and parenting can kind of be orthogonal sometimes. And so you've got to adjust. What did you expect to pick back up? How did work go while you were gone? How are you going to adjust? What relationships need a little more attention at work? What projects feel like they're good? I mean, the other piece is making sure that you're not ignored when you come back, right? I think one of the things that a lot of managers get wrong is that they just either don't talk about the baby and they don't acknowledge that you even were out, or they assume that because you had a baby, you now no longer want challenging projects, or you don't want travel, or you don't want intense stuff. And sometimes people leave not because they're overwhelmed, but because they're bored and they think, I'm not going to stay here if I'm being kind of treated almost with kid gloves. And it sounds like I'm making it an impossible situation for the managers, and it's not. It's all about communication and talking to that individual about what serves them. Because even if we're a parent, we want our work to be meaningful. Right. And
exactly. So when you go, it's funny because I've seen it both ways too. I've actually seen where people jump right back into it and they, keep going. And then what happens? They burn out, right? Because it's like, well, I hit the ground running. Or they are treated like they are kind of the pariah now that they have kids, that they have a child. We make these assumptions. So obviously, first of all, that's discriminatory behavior and can get you in trouble on the legal side of the world if you're treating people differently because they, gave birth or had a child, even as a father. And just human decency. I'm, opening up that line of communication. So I like the way that you talked about it, right? So it's this planning, like let's plan, let's figure out, is Sally going to take on this workload? Is Katie going to handle this? How much involvement do you want to be? Now, interestingly enough, HR people and managers, if you have an employee that is out, that is a non-exempt or an hourly employee, you have to plan that as well, because a salaried employer is actually treated for their projects they're completing, right? They're paid for the job, where an hourly employee is paid for the physical labor that they actually do. So if you have Jennifer that works in the call center and she's an hourly employee and she is actually a lead and she's having a baby and she goes out, you have to be careful if you're going to reach out to her during maternity leave, because you could wind up having to pay her for some of those hours worked. So again, it's that planning, like Anne is talking about. How are you going to manage this? Are you going to pay her, should she anticipate maybe working 5 hours a week while she's out on leave? What's that going to look like? So there's a lot of nuances that you really have to consider as an employer and as an employee. So outside of course, what kind of diapers do I need to buy? It's what's this transition going to look like when I go out? And then as a manager, how are you going to assume that responsibility? And then I love what you said about transitioning back in. And I think that's a piece that gets missed.
Yeah.
What are you seeing that too, where people just jump in and they just assume that you're going to be back to normal?
Completely. Right. I mean, I think from all sides as a parent, especially when it's your first, although I think that's still a big transition, even when you're having subsequent children, there's no real baseline for what is this even going to be like, right? Like you've literally never been a working parent before. You have no idea of how it's going to feel. So sometimes if it's just you and you're not seeking support, you don't always know what to expect. You don't know what to ask for. And, I think a lot of people, if they don't have that extra support, just kind of show back up and see how it goes. And there's not always great communication lines open. But I think there's a lot. And I think for managers, it's the same thing. It's like, well, I don't know. I don't want to say the wrong thing because that clearly happened. So I say nothing. And then we end up with this almost elephant of the room in the room of like, not going to talk about the fact that you had a baby and that might be impacting your work, right? And maybe the mom or dad coming back doesn't want to say, oh gosh, this kid is not sleeping and I'm feeling exhausted. I don't want it to look like I'm not pulling my weight at work, or my kid's sick and I don't know how to bring that up because they just took all this time off. So they're getting more and more stressed by not being able to be honest about this stuff. And management has no idea because they're not asking. And everyone's just kind of expecting it to go back to the way it was. And yet that's just not realistic, right? You can't
right.
It was once you have a child. That's not going to happen.
And I mean, let alone we're concerned about, and I know I had this mom guilt was terrible. Like I beat myself up because I put my child in daycare and now someone else is taking care of my kid and I'm worried about work. And it's interesting because I think sometimes companies do a really bad job when they return. It's like, okay, we're going to expect them to leave those worries at the door. Like you just said, maybe they're worried the child's sick and now they have this time off and how are they going to juggle that? And it's, don't think about your kid while you're working on this, the report over here, because, and I don't, that's not a healthy way to view it. It is call the elephant out in the room, if you will. Hey, I know it looks like you're struggling. Is there something I could do? And being a manager that wants to help work and help facilitate that return back to that employee.
Yeah. And one of the things I really work with companies and individuals to understand is that, yeah, it's different and it's not worse. Right. I think there's the stereotype that working parents now have their brain capacity divided. They can't, you cannot be a person that shows up at work in the same way. And that's true, but it's not all for the worse, right? You actually gain a lot of amazing skills when you become a parent. I mean, quite literally, your brain changes. You get more primed for learning and for interpersonal learning. And that's an incredibly useful tool at work. And I talk to companies and individuals about what I call the 4P leadership skills of parenting, because you actually learn so much and you bring all of that to the table if you're allowed to at work once you become a parent. So yeah, maybe you have a little less time, but you have all of these other things that you're showing up with that really enhance your work abilities.
What are those 4 Ps?
So I taught there. The first is people skills. That's like the really kind of obvious ones. Things like emotional intelligence and empathy, communication skills, right? Those like soft skills that we always think about as being part of good leadership. If you think about it, you have to develop your, grow in your emotional intelligence and your empathy skills to parent.
Absolutely.
Inevitable. But the next one is processing skills. So things like decision, being really decisive. When you become a parent, and again, true whether it's your first or your fourth or your 14th, I imagine, right? That constantly drinking from the fire hose. You are learning a ton of stuff all the time as your kid goes through all these developmental phases, and you have to take a lot of information in very quickly and act on it. Again, that's a really useful skill to be able to do at work. The next one is productivity. So basically being able to get the job done, right? Tenacity, patience, efficiency. If you think about what it takes to, get a toddler to do anything, that's be both really productive, really patient, and really kind of stick to your guns a bit. And all of that is stuff that shows up at work too. And then the last one is being able to just take some perspective and plan, almost like project management, if you will. As a parent, you are you're constantly multitasking, right? You have to think forward ahead while doing all sorts of things in the present and anticipate needs. I like to use the example of taking kids to the beach, right? If you're going to the beach with your family, you have to know who naps when so we don't miss nap time. Who's going to get hungry when? I need to have all the snacks. I need to have all the appropriate toys, the floaty, the swimsuit. I need to stake out the bathrooms, make sure I have the diapers for kids that don't use the bathroom. I need to make sure I have my sunscreen. Everybody else has their sunscreen. And I need to physically get all of this stuff to the beach and home and try to avoid meltdown, right? Like you're thinking so many pieces and holding that all. That's what a project manager is doing, right? I mean,
oh my gosh.
But that's essentially what you're doing all the time as a parent. And you don't even realize that this is actually a huge skill at work.
That's like the best example. In the back of my head, I can see my children running down the beach, and my 2-year-old headed straight for the ocean, and my 17-year-old off hanging out with his buddies. And I'm like, where is everybody? I'm like literally herding cats is the perfect way to say that about it. But oh my gosh, I love the 4 Ps. What a great perspective to play off of what you just said when you look at it that way. It's almost like it would be helpful for employers to have some sort of checklist for planning and for anticipating and for returning, and then kind of helping those employees go through that 4P process. I can see where your insight and your knowledge would be really exceptional for companies that are experiencing, lots of families, lots of babies being born. It's interesting that the birth rate's on a little bit of a decline. And from what I've noticed, millennials and Gen Zs in particular are waiting a little bit longer to have kids. And I think some of them are just overwhelmed. Like, I need to concentrate on my job, or how am I going to do both? And I'm a Gen Xer, and I'm the kid of a baby boomer. And so I think to some degrees, we just had kids. We'll figure it out on our own. So in looking at companies, we're talking about this, it sounds like a culture, right? So you're just really shifting from expecting the employee to do all the legwork to almost shifting your culture to supporting your employees. What are some ways that companies can create a culture that is invaluable to a working parent?
Yeah. I mean, I think that the best framework I use is to think about a culture of care, right? And I say that because I focus on working parents, but there's a lot of caregiving that's happening outside of work. Aging parents, you've got pets, chosen family. People do a lot of caregiving. So there's a lot of people that fall into the category of caregiving outside of work. And I think if we adopt a perspective of everyone's showing up and doing the best that they can, and they want to do a good job at their job, right? I don't think for the most part, people show up and say, I want to just butts
I want
around.
to suck today.
And I just don't care, right? I think people want to do a good job at their job. And so if we start from that belief, then we give them flexibility around how that job gets done. And flexibility is key to retaining working parents, right? And that can be flexibility of where they work, right? I know that the kind of RTO policies have been really hard on some working parents, especially parents that being parents during COVID. That can be flexibility around the hours, right? I mean, for example, my husband and I stagger our hours, and that's one of the things that helps us. I start work super early, and when our kids were daycare age, he did daycare drop off so that I could start super early, and then I was done early so I could do the other end. And that's kind of how we were able to work it. We only had that ability because I was self-employed at the time and could set my hours that way. But if employers allow for there's no important reason that I can't work from 7 to 3 instead, right? Fine. And so the flexibility around hours, where they work, and recognizing that somebody may not be available for that 4:00 meeting because of daycare pickup, but I guarantee you if there's work that needs to get done, they'll get it done at 9:00 after the kids go to bed, and kind of trusting that that's going to happen. I think that offering coaching, right, around having good, strong parental leave policies and offering coaching are huge. And also, if there's any sort of childcare benefit, I just read a fantastic article yesterday that I think, or maybe it was this weekend, that there's a 1 to 18 return on investment of every dollar spent on childcare benefit gives you an $18 return as a company. And similarly with parental leave benefit, the return on investment is huge. Because you're fostering retention, which is great, right? It costs a lot of money to replace a highly trained worker. But in addition to that, you're improving culture and morale, which is through improving engagement. And you're decreasing medical expenses because if you have good leave and coaching around that leave, then you are less likely actually to have any sort of perinatal depression or health complications, right? So there's all these pieces that are impacted by strong parental leave and strong working parent friendly policies that really end up benefiting the company and not just the employee, right? It's not just the right thing to do. It's also a good business decision.
Absolutely. And I mean, that's definitely one of Anne's services is to offer that level of coaching for companies. So if you are a manager or if you are, an owner of a company and looking for a great benefit, obviously work with Anne. We'll have her contact information in our show notes, but this is an area that probably people haven't thought about when it comes to offering coaching for returning parents. And I definitely can see a need. I can see a need. I mean, my youngest is 18 years old now, but I definitely can see where I personally would have benefited from this, particularly working in human resources and returning to work with so much on my plate already. And now it's I'm having to juggle even more. So I love that. You actually, so you're talking about some great benefits and you were talking about postpartum depression or depression. And this was an interesting statistic that I thought 1 in 10 women suffer from postpartum depression in the United States. So if we're already offering a benefit within our healthcare that helps with therapy, why would you not want to offer something like this that really helps these parents? And so those of you that can help make those decisions when it comes to benefits, thinking more globally, looking at your population. I know if you have a younger population, you tend to have more people that are in that childbearing age. I obviously am older, don't need that, but Anne talked about caregiving. I have aging parents, so maybe further down the road, I might need assistance with elder care. So again, it's creating this culture like Anne just discussed of care. All of your employees are at different stages in their lives, and they all are going to need kind of a different approach when it comes to either benefits or it comes to some work-life balance or challenge or engagement. How do you do that? This is another interesting statistic that according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, more than 75% of mothers and 95% of fathers work full time. So again, maybe you're staggering shifts with people because they don't, they can do their work from 7 to 3, or they can do their work from 4 to 9, or, somewhere along those times after someone's gone to school. Or gone to bed, their kids have gone to bed. And kind of to back Anne's comment about the return on one, for every dollar spent, you get $18 in return. According to a 2020 study, organizations that invest in employees and their families have 5.5 times more revenue growth. I'm like, that's crazy. Why would you not want to do this? This is almost like, don't shoot yourself in the foot. If you are supporting parents in the workplace, you're opening up an entire new talent pool, and you're not selling yourself short by only, working with people that don't have kids or outside of their childbearing age or don't want to even have children. So I think supporting working parents is the right thing to do when it comes to an organization.
Yeah. And you make such a good point there, right? Like, it's not, people leave sometimes when they don't have adequate policies and the return is dicey. But at this point, people leave prior to having kids if they know there are bad paternal or parental leave policies, right? So you're actually losing people out of your talent pipeline before you even realize it if you're not paying attention to this stuff.
Absolutely.
So
I get questions all the time on benefits, stuff like that. When I was, working in corporate life, it's like, what do your benefits look like? And I kind of have to think carefully where I want my focus to be at the audience I'm talking to. If I have let's say an older worker, someone that's in their, mid to late 40s or 50s, somewhere along that age, they're not going to want maternity, but they're not going to care about our maternity leave, but they're going to care about our elder care benefit or our life insurance policy. It's just kind of interesting where you're putting your focus based on your audience. While it might be the same package, it's really helping people identify what the part of the package is that will benefit them the most. So, it's even making sure that you understand what your leave looks like. So if, a working parent or someone was to come to you and say, hey, I want to employ your services, and what would that journey look like?
Well, if it's an individual, they usually reach out to me and then we set up a quick phone call and kind of figure out what's going to be the best fit for them. And, parental leave coaching, I set up as a 10 to 12 session kind of package over a year, right? From pregnancy to supporting them to the other side. If it's a company, we'll talk in a lot of different ways. So I'll do consulting around what does your leave policy look like? Is there flexibility to change that? Especially I get when I'm working with small companies, they may not have the financial means to change their policy too drastically, but we can talk about what can you do to make it more appealing? What can you do that is not a huge cost? And can you, again, especially if it's a small company, provide parental leave coaching as a contract, on a contract basis. They can hire me. Someone gets pregnant, right? I'm doing that, for example, with a school principal, right? And so the school is just hiring me for that. They don't actually have it's a very, very small school. They don't have anyone else right now that's going on leave. But I could do it as a group, right? Or as a regular thing through a large organization that happens to have multiple people going out on leave all the time because they have, 1,000 employees. So it can look depending on the company in terms of what that journey looks like. But it all starts with reaching out, and really I get to have a little bit of an inside look at what is uniquely the issue here at your company and how can I come up with a bespoke solution that is going to work for you and your need and your sector as well.
Is there, working with some of these different companies, are there any best practices that you've seen that you think would be great if, other companies could offer them?
Well, I think the best practices come down to having the most leave that you can possibly give. And again, I get that might look different at a Amazon versus, the town's local bookstore. But what is it that you can give? And where you can't give as enough paid leave, can you give a lot of flexibility to accommodate that and a lot of personalized support to accommodate that? I think at this point, parental leave coaching should be best practices, right? As we talked about today, not an easy transition. And there's a lot of unknowns and uncertainty on both managers and individuals. And so, to be able to I can do workshop training for managers so they know the right things to say and how to support people and provide coaching to the individual and can kind of walk both parties through the experience. It's just so much better for everybody. And so those, I think, are the big things that if people can bring in, it can make the whole parental leave process much, much better.
I love that. It's customization, it's specialized. And, I think sometimes companies worry that they're like, this is going to cost so much money, or this is going to take so much time, or this is, a benefit that only impacts a handful of people. Why would I want to do this? And I think it's, you really have to look at what do you have to gain? What is it that you're getting back in return? You're getting an engaged employee that isn't checking out because you're not offering something to help them stay engaged in their work or stay connected with the organization. And to me, that's a best practice. There are times that I'm impressed that we have 15, 16 states now that went to this paid medical leave. I worked for an organization, and you and I talked when we first did the discovery call, that I worked in a multi-state organization, and one of the states had actually adopted paid leave, and then the other state hadn't. But this company that I worked for was relatively small. It had less than 200 employees in it. And they said, listen, if that state's going to offer it to this handful of employees that we have working in that state, then we're going to offer this paid leave to everyone in the organization. Now, 200 employees, right? So this same type of leave is going to impact 200 employees. However, in the 3 years I was with this company, there probably were 5 or 6 people that took advantage of it. Not like take it for granted. I mean, took it and utilized it. Yeah. And so what we were so worried about it being abused or us paying too much money or whatever really only impacted 5 individuals. But those 5 individuals still at the company, still very appreciative, and still felt the connection with the organization. And they truly, as you stated, really felt cared about. It's like, I know that someone cares in this company and wants to see me return. And I think that in itself spoke volumes, because the 2 of the positions that went out and had a baby, they're extremely hard positions to find. And on average, it takes anywhere between 3 to 5 times someone's salary in recruiting and replacement costs. So if you have an $80,000 employee that you're trying to recruit for, then it's going to cost 3 times that to get them in the door and get them up to speed, and anywhere between 6 to 9 months worth of training and all the stuff that goes into that. So why not retain an $80,000 employee?
Right. I mean, not to mention the lost kind of institutional knowledge that right. It's technical stuff they're doing, plus all the stuff they take with them, plus the damage. If you see, I mean, that honestly, that's what happened when I left Harvard, and it was over stuff around this at the time that was happening, and kind of a lack of flexibility around working hours. I left, and then 3 other women left within the next year in the same boat because they saw me successfully leave. It became like, I'm not going to stick around. They didn't do anything for anyone else. Like everyone kind of started, it becomes a little bit of a little problem becomes a much bigger problem too, if you're not.
It's that ripple effect, if you will.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, Anne, this time went really fast. You can tell we're both really passionate about this subject. We're both working moms. We both have been there and have both had to transition through that. And I think this topic is going to continue to be incredibly important, and that people understand it and organizations are aware of this, amazing benefit that really has such tremendous impact on your employees, both male and female. This isn't just a female leave thing. This is a male leave too, when you're factoring in working dads as well. So, Anne, I can't wait to have you back. I know we have some, an interesting topic coming up that Anne and I are going to talk about, and that's women in STEM. Also a really great topic and very timely. But any last words of advice, Anne, you want to throw out to my listeners?
About 1,000, but all of the working moms and dads listening to this, you are doing an amazing job. It can feel so hard and so overwhelming. Whether your kid, I think, is 20 or 22, or I'll let you know if I think that when they're 42, but it's really, really hard, and you're doing a great job. And to anyone that is working at a company, and if any of this resonates with you and you want to bring in some extra support, please reach out. Even if you're not the decision maker, I can help work with you to get to the decision makers to bring this kind of support into your company, because I'm really passionate about it.
Absolutely. Well, thanks again, Anne. It was great having you on the podcast today. And thanks to my fabulous listeners. We appreciate the time you spent with Dear HR Diary by Manage with Heart. Obviously, very much the unfiltered truth you wish they taught in management school. I didn't learn this when when I was in school. And that's probably why I'm so passionate about it today. But again, looking forward to another episode. Stay fabulous.
Well, my fellow office warriors, that's a wrap for today's episode of Dear HR Diary by Manage with Heart. It's the unfiltered truth you wish they'd taught in management school. We hope you enjoyed this roller coaster ride through the intriguing realms of HR and management, complete with snark, sass, and a whole lot of heart. HR and management isn't just about policies and procedures. It's about people, passions, and the occasional workplace shenanigans. Got some interesting HR stories to share or a burning management question? Reach out. We love hearing from you. If you found value in today's episode, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review. Your feedback helps keeps the snark alive and the stories flowing. For more information or to book a consultation with me, go to managewithheart, that's HART.com. Dear HR Diary by Manage with Heart is signing off until next time. Stay fabulous and sassy, my fellow workplace warriors.